Thank you for coming out. We're about to get started. My name is Zachary. I'm the programs coordinator here at the Northeast Harbor Library. In the proud tradition of shushing librarians, please silence your phones if you haven't already. And while you do, I'll let you know that the library is able to offer free programs like this year-round, thanks to the generosity of our donors, and thanks to our community of artists, writers, and educators. Coming up next Tuesday, July 22nd, we're hosting a book launch event for Martha Todd Dudman's latest novel, Curio, and we're fortunate to have her in the room with us today. And on Wednesday, July 23rd, author Karen Tilburg will be discussing her book on conservation, her new book on conservation, Loving the Northwoods. To hear more about that and all of our upcoming programs, you can sign up for our newsletter and grab an events brochure at the table by the door. We also do have some books available for sale and signing tonight at that table. So tonight we're fortunate to have two presenters for you, both established and prolific authors whose keen observations and conversational writing styles cultivate a rich poetry rooted in the social landscape of Maine. Please welcome Hans Krichels and my former professor at College of the Atlantic, Bill Carpenter.
Well, I need to welcome everybody. First of all, often at gatherings like this, I look around and I know who my friends are because they're all the people who are not here. But I do have two people, a brother and his partner over there, and of course Donna and Bill are friends too. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the library here for offering this space to us. I want to thank Zach for engineering this whole thing, producing it really, guiding it, making it happen. Anyway, so thank you, Zach. And mostly for all of those people who are not yet friends of mine, I want to thank Bill, who you know well, for sharing this stage with me. So Bill and I have lunch regularly together over in Bucksport. So we've had a few lunch sessions to plan this thing. And the one thing we all agree on, I'm sure, in this room, you don't have to tell me if you disagree, is there's a terrible world, terrible stuff going on in the world out there. And Bill and I have decided that tonight we're not going to dwell on the terrible stuff. We're going to try to offer some kind of uplift or antidote to all the terrible stuff out there. Points of light, I called it during one lunch, saying while I was eating a sandwich. I mean, we had other terms for it, but we're going to try to keep it light, to just relief from all that's happening, beauty, art, whatever. We planned to do it. First we're going to do it alternating, and then we decided with Zach's guidance to break it down, and I'll do 15 minutes. When you get tired of me, Bill will come in and do 15 minutes. Then I'll come back on and do 15 minutes, and then Bill will come on for the final. And I say 15 minutes, it'll probably be more like 12 to 15 minutes. So, and I'm going to go through, and looking through, I have many collections of my writings, or baskets, I'll call them for the purposes here, different categories. And I'm going to touch down on probably 7 or 8 of these categories in the course of my 25 to 30 minutes here. And taken a lot of practice on the timing, and I'm sure Bill has done that too. And I have, to get my timing down, I have lectured to my woodshed. So if you guys get feeling a little bit loggy, blame my woodshed, not me. Okay. So anyway, I started with the best antidote to the stuff in the world is my neighborhood. I mean, that's really where we all have to, anyway. And I've just got a few things from the neighborhood basket. And the first one is, well, it's titled Old Phyllis Once Again. I've changed that to My Neighbor Phyllis, and this is Phyllis on her tricycle. There she was again this morning, waiting outside in her walker, just in front of our house, where she'd spotted us watering perennials and stopped to talk. Yesterday, she pedaled by on a large adult tricycle she keeps in her dooryard. So perky and alert is Phyllis, 80 years old with her sparkling eyes darting around like squirrels looking for acorns. Within minutes, we were chuckling appreciatively. Her comic timing is impeccable. Stories of her neighborhood, the older folks now before all we young folk moved in, stories of a community now fading into the history books, stories of her own grandmother, for example, how some young admirer at the paper mill where they both worked had sent her a crude and inappropriate gift, how her grandmother had baked him some brownies in return, and spent the next morning watching him run back and forth from his office to the restroom. I listen in awe. Think of all the researchers I know who came to Maine and gathered the stories of colorful old timers, storytellers to their last breath. How I'd known even back then that the women standing behind these old geezers had stories of their own, never collected and recorded. And now here's was Phyllis, eviscerating those old tellers of tales with her own laser-sharp stories. I thanked her, told her about all the stories I'd never recorded, and she invited me to come sit in her kitchen. She'll tell me stories that will stand my hair on end, she says. So stay tuned now for Stories from Phyllis's Kitchen, coming soon to a library near you. And my local library is going to put that in an anthology they've got coming out this fall. This other one haunts me. It's another little neighborhood story from my neighborhood bin. And it's very simple, but I can't get it out of my mind. It's called Searching for Milo. There, and I cheated. I have a picture of, this is true, I have a picture of the original sign and I can't find it. So I used my computer skill to recreate it, but this is what it was. There, just down the street, tacked to a telephone pole, on a cold February morning, a poster. Milo is missing. Our sweet, curious cat, Milo, went outside around 9 a.m. Sunday on Elm Street, and we haven't seen him since. Have you seen him? Thank you for any help you can provide. Sarah at 207, blah, blah, blah. And under that, a picture of a small black and white cat. Something about that message, Milo is missing. How we would love to call this Sarah. She'd sound like one of our granddaughters, we're sure. And we'd shout into the phone, Sarah, we found your cat. But we can't do that, of course, at least not yet. Instead, we pull on our winter boots, wrap scarves around our faces, and wander the neighborhood, calling out behind hedgerows and snowbanks. Here, Milo, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. We grow cold and tired. We return to our house for hot chocolate. We put some kitty kibbles in a tin can with a lid, don hats that we have with headlamps, and wander the streets again, calling out and rattling our can. Here, Milo, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. We will never stop searching for Milo. I read in, I will never stop searching for my lost youth, lost love, lost whatever, but we will never stop searching for something in our lives. And Milo really stuck with me. So moving on from my neighbors, I have another basket of profiles of what I call providers in my life. I've got one of my welder who welds things that go bad on my car. I've got one of my mechanic. I've got one of the UPS driver. These two I'll read are my hygienist. And this is my dental hygienist. And this is subtitled Road Rage. God, that's infuriating. I hate it when I get crawling along behind a slow driver and a passing lane comes along and the driver does not pull over. That happened to me twice on the way to my dental appointment yesterday. I tailgated the driver, blasting my horn and flashing my lights. I finally broke free, darting across double yellow lines, shaking my fist and muttering obscenities to myself. I was a bit surprised by the intensity of my own rage. And I remembered a time years before with my two young daughters, how they'd actually tape recorded me from the back seat of an old family Saab, recorded my mutterings just to make some point they wanted to make. At the dentist's office, my favorite hygienist, Amy again, listened patiently to my rant against these irresponsible drivers. She noticed a tiny tick on my arm, removed it with tweezers, and daubed the swelling with alcohol. She told me about a patient she'd had earlier that morning, a man who had fallen off his bicycle, how she attended to the cut in his knee, and a woman just after that who had asked her to pop a whitehead on her forehead. I hope you refused, I said, but Amy had gone ahead and popped the whitehead, with gloves on, of course, she said. I like being a nurse. And then back to the road rage. She told me the story of the youngest of her three sons. I've gotten to know these kids through her story. 7 years old and riding home in the back seat of her car, and a truck blocked their way in the parking lot. Amy waiting patiently, and then a little voice from the back seat, not angry, just sweet and piping. Come on now, shit or get off the pot. Amy was laughing as she told her story. I talked to my husband afterwards, she said, about how we have to be careful what we say in front of our kids. So I told Amy the story of my own daughter, 6 years old. We were heating our house with an old Ashley wood burner stove, and my daughter wandered into the kitchen one morning. Fuck, she said loudly. Jessica, I said, do you have any idea at all what that means? Yeah, she said. It means the fire went out. So Amy shook with laughter as she switched mouthwash over my teeth. I left with minty breath and a renewed determination to cultivate patience, understanding, humor, and general benevolence in the world around me. So that's my idea. Now moving on to my phlebotomist. At the clinic this morning, getting checked out for borderline anemia. We grow old, I thought. I told my phlebotomist, Janet, she told me to call her. I told her that phlebotomists of yore had had trouble finding veins in my arm. Janet smiled knowingly and told me about her father who had veins bulging like hawsers, and a young trainee one time who'd stabbed and stabbed, missed the vein and prepared to stab some more until her father grabbed the needle and completed the procedure on his own. Janet grinned at the thought. But not you, she said. You're what we call a hard stick. I rolled up my sleeve and Janet told me about her own difficulties following her breast cancer and chemotherapy. Certain veins, she told me, were off limits for the needle bearers. Others were hard to find. We're a pair of turnips, she confided in me. It's hard to get blood out of us. She eyed my inner elbow and poked with the touch of an angel and the vision of an eagle. A single easy stick and the job was completed. I rolled down my sleeve and went home with new appreciation for phlebotomists in general, not to mention the turnips growing in my garden. So. Okay, now I just moved one with Zach. This was on them folks out back. I've got a huge file, but I don't have time to read everything in my slot here. So I'm going to move this to my second turn so you'll have something to look forward to. I've got another bin of stories about what I call the lost children of Maine. I worked at, and Margaret here knows something about it, a residential treatment center in Bucksport doing off-campus programming. I had a big forestry program for kids for many years. And this is just one of those kids. I've got many more. And this is called Not the Boss of Me. What a stubby boy he was. Came about up to my armpit, but solid. Oh God, was he solid and strong as an ox. Stubborn too. You had to be stubborn. That was the only tool he had. Beaten and abused all his life, 13 years old, dull as dishwater, no social skills or wit about him. Stubborn was his secret power. Told to go clean his room or whatever, he would glare stupidly, roll up his shoulders around his ears and bellow, "You're not the boss of me." Anyone who ever worked with Chucky will remember that sound, like some howling from deep in a cave. I was working with Chucky at the time. Childcare work it was called, and Chucky was one of my charges. I learned to handle him in a way to not back him into a corner, to give him plenty of space to make up his own mind about things. I drove him home one time for a few days of respite, it was called, with his people. An uncle drunk on the doorstep when we got there, a dilapidated mobile home with high-pitched voices from inside, and 3 mangy dogs roaming about, pissing on junk cars, discarded washing machines, plastic bags of trash in the dooryard. Chucky was slow to get out of the car. When I returned 2 days later, he was uncommunicative, sullen, unusually even for Chucky, slow to follow directions. "You're not the boss of me." And all too often it would take 3 burly associates, they were called, to keep him from smashing windows, pissing on furniture like a dog in a junkyard. On those days, I grew especially fond of Chucky. There was a sweetness in him underneath all the rage. His drive to survive made him a hero in my eyes, a superhero. Even today, in the face of rude and petty officialdom, I hear Chucky's voice and I whisper for only myself to hear, "You're not the boss of me." Okay, I'll do one more. I forgot to set my timer. Is anybody keeping track?
You're on track.
I'm on track?
Yeah.
Another 2 minutes, maybe a minute and a half?
Plenty of time for both of them.
You're not the boss of me. Anyway, this I came across, there's another category I have called this business of leaving tracks. And I've got a lot of stories about a fox I tracked one time. Leaving tracks as a metaphor for recording your life. I take a lot of pictures. That's leaving tracks in a way. But this one's called When You Live Alone in the Woods, from this business of leaving tracks. Somebody say something? Oh. I was living alone that winter in a house in a clearing in the woods. When you live alone like that, strange things sometimes happen, and it's not always easy to distinguish between reality and illusion. There was my moose, for example, just 20 feet off my front porch. Or was that just a figment of my flickering imagination? Only a crushed croquet wicket in the grass and huge moose prints later in the day down in the garden balanced this tilting in my mind. This is important as checking for tracks, and that lesson has served me well. Meanwhile, there were my woodpeckers. They left no tracks, only my hasty scribblings on a stained yellow legal pad I found just yesterday in a box in a closet. Conversations with woodpeckers, it said at the top. When you live alone, seriously. Boris and Carlotta, I had named these avians, a pair of hairy woodpeckers at the feeder behind my house. Boris, he told me, was a retired gondolier. Carlotta still made guest appearances on stages around the world. This was a third mating for both of them, and they were a striking couple. Sorry about that. I could talk with Boris especially for hours about the true meaning of eternity, love, Jesus Christ, and other abstractions, such as living alone in a house in the middle of the woods. It was after one such discussion that Boris eyed me with his beady eye and said, "You know, my friend, to live without love is like getting your beak stuck in a fence post that's more rotten than you thought it was." His syntax was awkward as usual, but after all, what can you expect from a woodpecker? His words struck me deeply. I recorded them as he spoke on this aging yellow pad I hold in my hand at the moment. As I said at the outset, this business of leaving tracks is nothing to be sneezed at. So, thank you. I'll stop there.
Please welcome Bill Carpenter.
Hans, I'm sorry I sighed when you put the woodpecker up. I did because, first of all, because they're so cute. It just knocked me out to say, I always sigh when I see a cute bird. But also because hairy woodpeckers pound holes in the shingles of our siding of our house. So that was another kind of sigh. They both came out. But it's a good picture of Maine, all of us living between a moose and a woodpecker. And I'm going to read also some poems connected with images. And this, of course, is Picasso's Night Fishing and Team. And I look at that and I think of my favorite quote by Picasso when he went into a second grade classroom and looked at the art that they were drawing. And when he came out, he said, "When I was their age, I could draw like Raphael, but now all I want to do is draw like them." And is that right, Carl? It's roughly, he said something like that, and he was supposed to have said something like that anyway. This is a poem that I wrote in conjunction with night fishing, which I personally think, to me, is an image of all artists going out at night when the mysteries are closer to the surface, and trying to stab what unknown things we can do in the middle of the night. That's what we're all doing. I tried it, night fishing. 2 women walk the beach at Antibes. This is night fishing at Antibes, which is somewhere. 2 women walk the beach at Antibes. One holds a small tray with a slender glass of wine. The other has 3 eyes, and it is she who looks into the night and sees the boats, their lights fathoming the air like stars, their men in quiet voices calling the names of other boats, the names of men sailing the boats, calling the fish themselves by their indigenous names until they rise luminous to the dark surface. On the boat, in the foreground of this canvas, you are the one sailing, the captain, and the man you have hired for the bow is Pablo Picasso, who holds in one hand a lighted torch and in the other a 5-pointed spear. He calls down the name of a fish into the water. He says, Pleronictus fleecis, and a white flounder climbs to the surface like a death mask for the old artist whose eyes over the years have migrated to one side of his face, which is a black disc shaped like the dark half of the moon. You stare into the ocean and see nothing. So you start to row while Pablo Picasso spears one fish after another, some souls, some skates, some throwbacks. I'll let you guys get seated on Pablo Picasso spears one fish after another, some souls, some skates, some throwbacks with glass bodies and startling single eyes. He is filling the boat with fish so that it rides low in the water, and he has you row so far that the women on shore seem to have beaks like the faces of 2 gulls. Now he is nearly over the side. You are holding Picasso's feet as he wrestles with something like a bull's head half out of the sea. You command him to let go, so it slips out of his grasp. Pablo, you say it was too much. The boat could never hold a monster. No one would purchase it. The boats now reappear loaded with fish, their crews singing in Portuguese about lost love, about the king and queen of a lost land. Picasso, seated on the catch, sketches as you row him home, the 2 women on the shore, giving them the heads of horses, giving them horse eyes and the thick ruminant teeth of the horse. You are a partnership, a corporation in the fish business together. You pile fish on the night wharf while Pablo holds up the lantern and bargains with a man, not just for cash, but for the women also whose heads are classical, who cause you to forget the night and gather down the stars like birds on fire. Yeah, thank you. Okay, can you do the, yeah, okay. The next poem I'm going to read is based on an old horror film called The Thing, which came out in 1951 when I was about 10 years old. And I saw, it was the scariest movie I ever saw in my life. I went, you guys, some people here might remember it. And it was remade later on, but this was the original. This was the real one, The Thing. And I went to see it, but I only lasted, what happens is the thing falls down in a flying saucer into the Arctic ice, and but it's frozen in ice, so it can't move. And they bring it in, and but the soldier who was assigned to guard it puts a blanket on it so we can't see it because it's so horrifying. And the camera follows the cord to the wallet, to the electric blanket. You've all seen this, right? The blanket melts it, the ice melts, the thing starts coming out. And I was so scared that I ran up and ran into the ticket taker's booth. And I watched the rest of the movie from the back of the ticket taker's booth, holding the hand of this woman who was up there. That was, and that's not the poem. Oh, I know what and she tried to calm me by saying that it was just a giant carrot. I have to say, I've been very nervous about carrots then, both then and now. And that didn't do me any good. The thing in the old horror classic, okay, the thing. In the old horror classic, The Thing, they brought the monster to the Quonset hut frozen in ice. The corporal or private on sentry duty tossed the blanket over its face. Only the blanket was electric, it was plugged in. You watched the ice melt, you saw the shadow rise over the soldier reading his book. Watch out, you said, behind you, with every kid in the majestic theater, but the man heard nothing and was strangled or his skull crushed. That way, the thing entered the human world, your world, and you walked home squeezing your eyelids closed, trying to forget what they had seen. The thing out there in the blizzard, tearing up the huskies, the clusters of spore pods in its hand. Now you have kids yourself. One of them's at the shoe plant, one's away at school. Your wife is on sabbatical. You are the only person home. You're thinking about the future, how it grows smaller and closer every time you sleep. So you stay up, you walk from room to room, you choose the guest bedroom with the electric blanket, and you turn it on. Outside, it's January. The moon changes the snow to an albino desert, miles of cold sand twisted into hills, and beyond that, the snowy mountains. You turn the blanket up and read. You hear a sound somewhere like melting ice. There's movement, something is thawing out. Something frozen stiff for a long time is rising under the electric blanket. Its shadow fills the bedroom wall. It's larger than you thought. The phone is useless. There's nobody for miles. The thing that has been walking toward you all these years, it throws its covers off. You wait for it to kill you, but it's smaller than you remembered, and its face is human. It looks tired, like somebody carrying a message that no longer counts. You are not scared. You're not a child at the movies, but a grown man standing before a mirror in a vacant house, a man shaking from coffee and insomnia who wants something to be final, the way the thing was final in its time, a root vegetable with all the answers. Hairy and bulletproof forever, the thing inside us that could save us maybe from the thing we are. I have the next image is Evening Wind. I've got to watch my time a little bit. This is Edward Hopper drawing, etching, and it just makes me feel, seeing it, that the only bad thing about being a poet, I've always had painter envy. Everybody else in my family can draw and paint, and one thing I wish about poetry and writing would be if we could have models, it would be better. Because they would sit still for us. This is called Evening Wind. The young model undressed before the poet, who stood with pen and notebook and made words like lines, phrases like shadows in a woodcut. He knelt her on the bed in the $1 hotel. The damp city wind blew back the curtains. She started up, her hair fell on her breasts. Her hand touched the mattress like a cat's foot. He worked on metaphors. The evening window was a white paper. Smells entered like words from the young city, the smell of the steam railroad, the smell of the delicatessen on 10th Street, the smell of animals carried through the streets. What did she hear on the bleak wind? The room was full of senses. There was a strange man behind her shadow. It was the poet with his book of fear, writing and writing in her intimate space. She saw and covered herself. She folded her head into her arms and wept. Okay. And I'm going to skip the next one for time, just go past New York movie and go to gas. That's good. This is going away. I love that picture. And I have, I remember sometime around 9/11, 20 years ago or so, I remember stopping at this place. Do you remember? Yes, do you remember stopping at this place? Was it even selling gas at the time? I'm not sure, but I knew from the looks of it that it was that place and where it is on Route 6 in Wellfleet, Mass. And so, and I stopped in and I asked the guy who was the proprietor, I said, is this the place? And he said, yes, it is. And the other thing is, this is a painting from 1940, clearly in the fall from the foliage. And I was born Halloween 1940, so I've always associated this with my own birth. And I've been working, and I got it out again, and after a long time since writing it, and I've been working on it for a couple of days now, working and changing it to make it, I don't know what. This is called Gas, and I have to know this. Just what is this guy doing with his hands? Is he putting the hose away after filling us? Is it ourselves in the rearview mirror of this painting heading for Truro in late October? Could it be Halloween evening 1940? Could the Battle of Britain flaming in the dark? I study this image till a 32 Ford Roadster drives into the frame. And it's my own father stopping for gas and for directions, as if he has lost his way. But in the sky, Hopper has stationed the winged horse Pegasus to overcome time and space. Somewhere in Massachusetts, a young woman labors in total anesthesia. Her first child enters the world with his mother asleep and his eyes closed. Her first child enters the world with his mother asleep and his eyes closed. How could we have foreseen what night was coming? And do I have, in my 15 minutes, 2 minutes? Do? Okay. Okay, and this is from another favorite picture, a movie of mine, a movie still, Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain, which made us also happy in 1953 when it came out. A man stands in the rain outside his house. Pretty soon, the rain soaks through his jacket and shirt. He could always go in, but he wants to be wet, to be really wet, so it finally gets through his skin and begins raining on the rooftops of the small city that the man always carries with inside him, a city where it hasn't rained for 30 years. Only now the sky darkens and tremendous drops fall in the thick dust of the streets. The man's wife knocks on the window, trying to call him in. She twirls one finger around her ear to sign that he's crazy, that he'll get sick again, standing in street clothes in a downpour. She puts the finger in her mouth like a thermometer. Like a thermometer, she forms the word idiot with her lips, and always when she says that, he's given in. But now he stands there. His whole life, he's wanted to give something, to sacrifice. At times, he's felt like coming up to people on the street, offering his blood. Here, you look like you need blood. Take mine. Now he can feel the people of his city waking as if from a long drought. He feels them leaving their houses and jobs, standing with their heads up and their mouths open, and the little kids taking their clothes off and lying on their bellies in the streams and puddles, formed by the new rain that the man's making himself, not by doing anything, but standing there while the rain soaks through his clothes. He can see his wife and his own kids staring from the window. The younger kid laughs at his crazy father, the older one sad, almost in tears, and the dog, Ossian. But the man wants to drown the city in rain. He wants the small, crowded apartments and the sleazy taverns to empty their people into the streets. He wants a single man with an umbrella to break out dancing the same way Gene Kelly danced in Singing in the Rain, and then another man and more, until the whole city is doing turns and pirouettes with their canes or umbrellas, first alone, then taking each other by the arm and waist, forming a larger and larger circle in the square, and not to any music, but the percussion of the rain on the roof of his own house. And if there's a woman among the dancers, a woman in a flowery print skirt, a woman wetter and happier and more beautiful than the rest, may this man be forgiven for falling in love on a spring morning in the democracy of the rain. May he be forgiven for letting his family think this is just what to expect from someone who is every day older and more eccentric. May he be forgiven for evading his responsibilities, for growing simple in the middle of his life, for ruining his best pants and his one decent tie.
We have one session each for both.
Yes. I'll clear out of here.
And if it's okay with the audience, the answer is always going to be keep going because I'm feeling great and I'd like to hear more poetry.
Thank you, Bill. Bill's always a hard act to follow. I mean, the one saving grace I have is myself is so totally different from his that I don't feel, in competition at all. But, anyway, part two here. I'm not going to read from this particular book. It's in the back if anybody wants it, that one. But I do have a large collection. I had probably many years of my life, decades, living out back in Maine. And I've got so many stories about what they call the homesteading movement. I was just interviewed by a Bangor Daily News reporter last week, for a story she was doing about the old homesteading movement. And the first thing I do is correct the idea that well, they weren't homesteaders. Homesteaders were in covered wagons heading west, breaking sod, that kind of stuff. These were a bunch of really fairly privileged young people who were very progressive and had certain inclinations and wishes, and they could actualize a life they were in control of on cheap land in Maine, basically. So, I mean, it was a back to the land movement, certainly. There were many aspects to it. But what I was really fascinated by, and I won't drone on here, was the interaction between the new culture that these people brought into Maine and the old culture, both the culture in town, but also with the outback people. So I've got a bin, I'm going to keep coming back to my collections, a bin of stories called Them Folks Out Back, about profiles of outback people. And I will read a short one here, just as an example. But I collected a number of these stories they're in this book along with some other stuff. And I'll go through, I'm just going to read the titles to give you just sort of a sense, and I'll do a few details on one of them. The first story in the book is called The Battle of the Titans. It's about a bunch of these back to the landers who wanted to blend with the town they were in. And so they formed a softball team and joined the Green Grass Softball League, playing against all these other teams, about a dozen other teams in the town. They call themselves, I should say we, but they call themselves the Blueberry Barons. And they had the fortunate or unfortunate opportunity to have a woman playing on their team. And she just happened to be the captain of the Syracuse girls softball team that had just won the national title in softball. She was a super good softball player. And there are whole chapters of dialogue with these other teams you know, what are we gonna do? Hey, we can't hit her there. Nobody ever described where there was, but they couldn't hit her there. Anyway, that was the Battle of the Titans. There's another one called The Prince and the Pauper, about somebody who comes up with a very ingenious way to support his back to the land activities, his gardens and his goats and stuff. The old Babcock Road mystery, the curious incident of the man in the fog. That is about, I don't know if you can see it in this picture. That's an osprey over the town I'm talking about. That's an iconic tombstone in the town with a witch's foot on it. The story goes that she was burned at the stake by the owner of the founder of the town. And in my story, some descendant of hers comes out of the fog and confronts the manager of the town, demanding rights for the descendants of the witch who was originally burned. And of whom there are many among us to this day, I think there's a line in the story. And the town refuses. And the lake starts to disappear. And the tour buses start stopping to take pictures, swarm to this. And they stop, so the town coffers start shrinking. So, and then the figure from the fog reemerges and strikes a deal with the manager of the town for reparations for all descendants of the original witch who was. Anyway, that's the curious incident of the man in the fog. There's a suit to Harry Mann's garage. Some other titles here, From Here to Yucca Flat, about an organic gardener who just gets absolutely fed up, steals a stallion and heads west. Insignificant Action, Story of the Ugly Sweater, Diary of the Rototiller. I've read sections of that at the Common Ground Fair because, I mean, it was a real effort by probably 8 households to co-own a rototiller for tilling up their gardens. And there was a manual that went with, I mean, a notebook that went with it where you're supposed to write down your hours of usage and, you know, any notes of interest to other owners of this rototiller. And I still, my brother Stephen over there, I think still has that notebook. I'm going to read just a couple of passages from the notebook. September 26, 1975. And the story ends with me interviewing one of the original people who has the notebook. It's not my brother, but he has the notebook in my story. But note from September 26, 1975, Frank and Emily. Thanks, Darla, for dropping the tiller off. 2 hours of use. I changed the oil and tightened the belts. 2 things, though. There was miracle grow in the crud on the tines. Do not use that stuff in your garden. And please clean tines before passing tiller along. I do not want your shit in my garden. So it became increasingly acrimonious as the time went by. March 26, 1976, Tom and Joyce. Tiller running great, 2.5 hours of use, but hey guys, just a heads up. There's something that really pisses me off. When one of you, not to mention any names, uses the tiller right up until 2 minutes before oil change time, and then drops it off for the next user, me, to deal with. Jesus, just till your garden for another 2 minutes. And 2 minutes and change the fucking oil. Anyway, it really is hilarious. So anyway, back to Michael and Darla speaking. Please do not leave weeds tangled in the tines of the tiller. Our gardens reflect a struggle between the forces of good and the agents of evil. Please keep your weeds to yourself. 2 hours of use and I did it all. Praise the Lord. By this point, Tom Garvey and I are both a bit tipsy from his homebrew. The book lies open in my lap, the final entry from a man named Roger. No hours of use, tillers in the shop, sorry guys, I can't do this anymore, followed by a whole lot of empty pages. I put the book on the table, across the meadow in the deepening shadows, I noticed the outline of a tiller, familiar, Troy-shaped, half hidden in the alders. Is that it, I asked Tom? He grins again, mumbles something about ownership by default. Behind the tiller, tangled in the alders, an old Volkswagen microbus squats on its wheel hubs. The 40-foot maple tree grows up through the floorboards and out through the sunroof. So those are stories about that era. There is another bin I've got from the old timers out back, them folks out back, I call it this particular basket. And this is one particular character. This is very short. I'm reading from these pages because I find it at reading awkward to be shuffling between. Some of these stuff are in books. I have this file here just to impress you, but I'm not going to try to read from the books. It's called Backwoods Justice. Old Miller Gray out there, one of a kind, story after story about the old days, about gaming the game warden, gaming the system. Said he was unfit for service back in the first big war. Told the sergeant he could shoot the eye out of a squirrel from half a mile away, would never aim his gun at a living human being. Last week, Miller's old neighbor Hal showed up, shaking his head, eyebrows singed to his bony forehead. Geez, I'm criminy, he said to Miller. Never seen the like of it. Log blew up in my wood stove, blew a hole clean through the chimney. Miller clucked solicitously. He'd sort of suspected it was Hal all along, absconding with a log every now and then from the top of his wood pile. So he'd gone out secretive-like, drilled holes in the butt ends of some logs, them that was most handy, filled them with gunpowder and plugged them up so neat no one would ever notice. Figured he'd find out soon enough who was stealing his logs. I sort of suspected it was Hal, old Miller said afterwards. Otherwise, I would have used dynamite. Another writing collection category, I've been engaged for a couple of years with my various siblings. I've got 5 siblings, there are 6 of us. And one of the brothers at the beginning of COVID started something called Sibloom, where a topic would be selected and everyone would write an essay on that topic. And so at the Zoom session, we would have all read each other's essays and we'd have a session talking about, there's some incredible, I'm not the best writer in my family by a long way anyway, but this was a particular assignment and I'm just as a sample of that. The assignment here was my parents were members of this very shabby, rustic sailing club, sort of boating club. It was called the Mackinac Boating Club, but it wasn't fancy like some New York yacht club or anything. But I mean, this is a little piece called Night Sailing on Lake Mackinac. And I'm reading it because I'm in Northeast Harbor and everybody loves sailing down here. So many memories of magical soft summer evenings in those childhood and young adulthood years back in the Berkshire Hills in Western Massachusetts. I remember one evening in particular. As a teenager, I was official sailing instructor at something called the Mackinac Boating Club. And I seem to have had privileged access to buildings and boats, not to mention friendships with summer staff at the place. And that one evening, stretching deep into nighttime, just myself and a few friends gliding soundlessly in Tubby Ghost. I believe that was the name of the old wee Scot we were in. That's the only thing, I don't have any pictures of it, but that's an old wee Scot. It's a very classy little sailboat. I believe that was the name of the old wee Scot we were in. Lake black under pale moonlight, glassy with the faintest whisper of wind, not even ruffling the surface, just enough wind to keep the boat moving at a snail's pace. You could dip your finger in the water and see the faintest V of a ripple to mark forward progress. That was reality, but with only darkness around us, no landscape to mark our passage, we were flying, gliding soundlessly across the lake at great speed. We were exhilarated and buoyed by music. Did I mention the music? Wave after wave of Tchaikovsky washing down the hillside, B minor pathétique, as I seem to recall, a veritable tsunami of sound, gorgeous to our ears, sweeping over the lake, sweeping us away at speeds the winds could only dream of. I remember that sensation so clearly, of being engulfed, swept away. That was Tanglewood up there on the hillside, after all, summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. We were just a boatload of trespassing teenagers, caught up in the music, touched and transported for a lifetime. Well, and this, I'm not quite sure why this is in here. I'm going to have a category I just call miscellaneous. I sort of like this. These last 3 are fairly short, and I think all of them are going to reappear over the coming year in various anthologies and so on. So this one is called Payphone at Sandy Point. And probably I should start a bin of stuff of places near where Bill lives, because Sandy Point is right near where Bill Carpenter lives. But there, Payphone at Sandy Point. There in the little town of Stockton Springs, on the corner of a ramshackle outbuilding, at the edge of a little parking lot on a wooded knoll just above the long pebbled shore of the mighty Penobscot River, just there, like some relic from a bygone culture, an old-fashioned payphone gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. There were 4 of us on that knoll that wintry afternoon, 3 adults and a visiting child. Jessica, mother of the child, and that's the child there, and that's a payphone. It's magic. I mean, I can start reading something. Nothing good there. There were 4 of us on the knoll that wintry afternoon, 3 adults and the visiting grandchild, mother of the child. Jessica, mother of the child, studied the relic, pulled out her own little high-tech handheld device and dialed a number. The relic rang, raucous in the stillness. "Answer it, Elliot," one of us urged, and the child picked up the receiver, put it to her ear. Silly small talk ensued until the mother said, "You can hang up now, Elia." The child held the phone in her hand. "You can hang up now, Elia," the mother repeated. The child looked at her puzzled. "But Mom," she pleaded, "I don't know how to hang up." The adults looked at one another and burst out laughing. The sun was setting over the river, but a new age was dawning. So. Two more. Do I have a little more time?
So 6:23.
What?
Yes.
Okay. This one is one of my favorites. It has been published before. I think it may be in one of these books here. It's going to be republished this fall in an anthology up in Bangor, but it's about, it's called Sandman in Acadia. And there it is. I think you probably all know Sand Beach over here on the island. Everybody knows it, so you'll recognize the scenery here. Magnificent, the shoreline, the mountains, great head in the background, far away the pandemic of 2020 raging through the countryside. It is late October now in Acadia National Park. The beach is deserted, except for me, or so it appears. Just below, someone has expertly carved a figure into the sand. A muscled, middle-aged man with jowly cheeks and balding head sprawled on his back, every man awaiting his fate. I stand just above the figure's head, watching the waves roll in, lap at his feet. Time and tide, they say, for no man wait. Like sand through an hourglass, the toes wash away. A swirling of frothy water and the feet are gone. Standing a bit farther back now, I document this process with my Canon EOS 1000, Fugacia Omnia, I think to myself as the ankles and knees disappear. Yes, all is fleeting, I repeat, but this at least I will preserve, a creation of my own, overriding the best intentions of the artist before me. I capture the belly as it dissolves into smooth, glistening sand, and then also smug in my godliness, I look up and see to my left, high on the ledge to great head, a man with a tripod and a camera, just like my own, capturing his own story of me and the story I am telling. I look back at the figure at my feet. Only the tips of the ears remain and the crescent dome at the top of the head. I step back from the rising tide, the waves swirling and lapping at my feet. Above me, the man on the ledge has vanished. It's only me now and the gentle washing of the waves. You'll get me someday. And that last, in those talks Bill and I had over restaurants, we decided not to dwell on all the terrible stuff going on in the world today. Not that we don't know it's there, and we can go talk about it with our friends tomorrow and everything, but I'm pointedly avoiding this. And I was reminded of a little piece I had in the little COVID book there. And this piece is very important to me for a number of reasons. One, I mean, the symbolism is incredible. It's called Over There in the Garden. And I was reading one time last year, and a girl, a young woman in the front row said, "Could you read the one on page 42? And that touched me more than 300 people clapping or whatever. To have one person say, "I read your poem, I remember what page it's on, I loved it, speak it to me." So in honor of that young lady, I'll read it again here. But this is, I come back to it because these are more troubled times than they were during the pandemic now. And I mean, this to me is I'll leave you with this as sort of a symbol of something beautiful. Over there in the garden, day 187 of this pandemic in our town. Virus raging again this morning and pandemonium in our cities. And for all of that, over there in the garden, a single morning glory blossom, brilliant blue against the grayness of the sky and sheltered from the rain by a great sunflower, bent over protectively, umbrella-like, face now brown from an early frost, and pecked clean of its seeds by migrating birds. Ragged fronds of once bright petals hang from the pie-pan face like pickets in a fence, circling the single blossom, heavenly blue, radiant under a darkly clouded sky, sheltered from the falling rain. It's fun to read. I can get nervous. You didn't make me nervous at all. Thank you. Okay, Bill, your turn again.
Thanks, Hans. We were privileged when the pandemic hit. What a good place. I think we had it. 6 miles between people. I got, that's right, don't cover that. Okay. Marston Hartley's painting is the key to this poem called At the Foxtrot Motel. I was at an academic conference up in Presque Isle, Maine on Marston Hartley, and they put us up in a motel at night with limited recreational facilities. But we did have a cable TV, and in the conference, we had been talking about this picture and this, because this was Marston Hartley's beloved friend, Adelard Mason, who was drowned in Nova Scotia, and it was a terrible blow, lifetime blow to Marston Hartley. And we've been talking about that, which is sort of a sad end to that day of the conference, to think of this person drowning, trying to row home, a fisherman trying to row home from a sinking ship. It was at the Foxtrot Motel. It was October in Presque Isle, potato season. And all evening at the bar of the Foxtrot Motel, we talked about artists and their sad lives. The kids who worked in the potato fields were in the next room dancing. We got lugubrious by the fire, thinking of Marston Hartley, how he tried to perfect his life, how he found a young fisherman in Nova Scotia and might have finally known happiness, but the boy drowned in a storm off Lunenburg. He lost and lost. His losses made him paint more beautifully, as if he'd squeezed the colors of those landscapes out of tubes containing his own skin and blood. After hours in the parking lot, I said goodnight to the 2 professors of art history. I watched young couples drive off into the Aroostook night, each of them looking for the right spot under the moon. Though one couple stayed right there, they reclined the seats of their Chevy Camaro, then reclined themselves into one seat, and when I looked up, there were stars that I had never seen. Between the ordinary stars and stars between those, as if the universe were solid light with just a few patches of darkness moving apart from themselves, almost like islands, like shadows of the drowned traveling home. At 2 a.m., I found myself ready for action, and nothing on TV but one cable channel, a blue movie, scrambled, only the voices clear. The bodies broken into Kandinsky shapes, kaleidoscopic. I wanted to see them. I knew things were coming off. I could see clothing. I could see more and more human skin, a breast, a penis, like fragments of the pictures my mother found once and tore up right before my eyes. I wanted to see them whole. I played with the antenna coupling. I wiggled it and wiggled all the knobs. Vertical hold, horizontal hold, brilliance and contrast. I took my shoe and struck the coupling, then struck the socket where the cable entered the wall of the motel. The actors were breathing faster. The man said, "Tell me I'm better than anything you've had. Tell me." And she said, "Yes." The scrambled image being all pink now, a pink tide pool of hands and nipples. If I didn't fix it fast, it would be too late. I'd be alone in Presque Isle with nothing on the screen. I started kicking the side of the set, first softly, then hard, kicking to the breath rhythms of the actors who had stopped acting, who had forgotten their lines and instructions and were just making love like anyone. The color screen swirled with flushed skin and with such lovely hair that I kicked harder, wanting to witness the film's climax, which would also be the climax of the whole Presque Isle night. The workers parked in the picked fields with their girls, even the art history professors and their wives, all of them set to explode like a cut star. Finally, I kicked the knob itself, while the actress on the closed channel murmured, hurt me. And I said, "Yes, I will." I kicked it solid in the center of the big screen. Glass flew everywhere. One gaseous spurt of color and of colored sparks. The room went dark. And it was dark outside, as if there'd been a street fight in Presque Isle, and someone had hit or kicked his enemy so hard, the lights went out. Not just the street lamps, but the lights of houses, then the stars over Aroostook County, so there was only space and all of us falling through it, the potato harvesters, the night clerk at the Foxtrot, the couple in the movie, and somewhere Marston Hartley and his drowned sailor, dead ones and living ones finally falling in the same direction at the same blinding speed. They don't have that technology anymore. That couldn't happen now. This kind of screen doesn't do it. This is this is a painting called First Couple by one of the Tiny House series by beloved local painter Bill Irvine. And I once was going, I passed in the courthouse gallery, right? Courthouse gallery. And I saw this picture for sale. I was in a hurry. I was with somebody who had to move on. And I was terrified that it would be gone when I came back. And I came back, and luckily it was still there a couple of days later when I came back by myself, and I was able to get this picture, which is called Girl with Apple, I think, Girl with Apple, though I've renamed it for the poem, First Couple. Can you see it okay? Okay. And I really identify with the guy in the inside. And I think this fits our household pretty well. It's called, I call it First Couple. I don't know if Bill's. And anyway, at some point, I think Bill contacted the owners of these pictures and said, would you write something, or at least be contacted? And because he's made a wonderful book about these little houses, and First Couple, real nudists love apples. Real nudists love apples, and we always have. Someone said maybe we shouldn't eat them, but what the hell? We'd just been created and we were starved. It was either the apples or the herring gulls. No one would know. No one else even existed. Just this one little garter snake on an innocent rock. I said, Bill, we're being stupid. He's not even around. You're tallest. Reach up and pick me one. We ate the apple. We ate the core and swallowed the seeds of time. Then, honest to God, the sky darkened and the sun went out. It started snowing and a plow drove past that said Maine Department of Transportation. 15 degrees, 15 below zero, and there we stood, not even underwear. I gave him an ultimatum. I said, Bill, build us a little house with a wood stove or I'm leaving for Mexico. What's more, you and those seagulls have eaten half the apples. You've had your limit, butt out. This one belongs to me. I'm just going to read one more if I can read it. This is called Girl Writing a Letter. And Carl, you sent me one of the pictures, and there's a question as to what picture is in this. You sent me one in which is beautiful from Amsterdam, but it looks a little bit to me like she's wearing a maternity dress, and that wouldn't do for the story. I don't know if you feel that way. Anyway, none of these, the stolen one that was stolen from the Gardner Museum didn't quite fit because it's actually a concert where the girl is singing. And then, so I really have had to construct my own Vermeer for this poem, Girl Writing a Letter. A thief drives to the museum in his black van. The night watchman says, sorry, closed, you have to come back tomorrow. The thief sticks the point of his knife in the guard's ear. I haven't got all evening, he says, I need some art. Art is for pleasure, the guard says, not possession. You can't something, and then the duct tape is going across his mouth. Don't worry, the thief says, we're both on the same side. He finds the Dutch masters and he goes right for a Vermeer. Girl Writing a Letter. The thief knows what he's doing. He has a PhD. He slices the canvas on one edge from the shelf, holding the salad bowls right down to the square of sunlight on the black and white checked floor. The girl doesn't hear this. She's too absorbed in writing her letter. She doesn't notice him until too late. He's in the picture. He's already seated at the harpsichord. He's playing the G minor sonata by Domenico Scarlatti, which once made her heart beat till it passed the harpsichord and raced ahead and waited for the music to catch up. She's worked on this letter for 320 years. Now a man's here, and although he's dressed in some weird clothes, he's playing the harpsichord for her. For her alone, there's no one else alive in the museum. The man she was writing to is dead. Time to stop thinking about him. The artist who painted her is dead. She should be dead herself, only she has an ear for music and a heart that's running up the staircase of the Gardner Museum with a man she's only known for a few minutes. But it's true, it feels like her whole life. So when the thief hands her the knife and says, you slice the paintings out of their frames, you roll them up, she does it. When he says, you put a strip of duct tape over the guard's mouth so he'll stop talking about aesthetics, she takes him. And when the thief puts her behind the wheel and says, drive, baby, the night is ours, it is the girl writing a letter who steers the black van onto the westbound ramp for Storrow Drive and then to the Mass Pike. It's the girl writing a letter who drives 80 miles an hour headed west into a country that's not even discovered yet, with a known criminal, a van full of old masters, and nowhere to go but down. But for the girl writing a letter, these things don't matter. She's got a beer in her free hand. She's on the road. She's real and she's in love. Thank you. Thanks very much, Zach. And
For a little Q&A.
sure. I don't know if we have the A, but maybe we could sit here.
Yeah, any questions or statements or responses, please do ask away. I'm just going to move some furniture to get the microphone in place. More center. Bill, would you mind going a little bit more center? The space is yours.
Bill,
Well, nice to see you, Bill.
John, what do you think?
That was great. I'm interested to know how recent are these poems that you've read?
Well, they're pretty not recent. They vary from 40 years to maybe 5, 10, 5 or 8 years. So these are all pictures over time that if you're thinking of mine, it's a question to Hans too. Your when?
Well, I think one of them, I think I had the conversations with woodpeckers probably about 1976. I think I wrote the piece about it in the 1980s. That's probably by far the oldest thing I read. I think the thing about Phyllis and her grandmother working in the mill, I think I wrote that last week and took it over to Phyllis's house and read it to her. I call her old Phyllis and she says, I'm only a day older than you, but she was really tickled by it. So I brought her a copy of the picture. So I mean, that's very recent. I mean, I've got more recent stuff in the business of leaving tracks. I've got a piece that's this past winter that hasn't been published. I mean, a lot of my stuff has not been published just because I'm not good at marketing. So, but I'm doing more, so.
Yes.
I was surprised by your answer because, maybe because I come from an academic background, I'm thinking, is it dangerous to publish funny poems when you're young? Once you're old, you have license.
Is it dangerous to publish poems when you're young?
Funny poems.
Oh, funny
Because
poems.
you won't be considered a serious poet now.
Well, you know, I really didn't start writing poetry till I was middle-aged anyway, so I never wrote any poems when I was young. I would love to go back and have that opportunity. But I had to get through some other stuff first.
Don't we all?
Yeah. But
I was just gonna say, I remember you reading the Foxtrot Hotel in the planetarium in Orono about 35, 40.
maybe, yeah.
Yes, with Constance Honey. She was also reading for us.
Oh, right,
It was a
okay.
wonderful reading.
I remember.
And I still
yeah,
love
yeah,
the poem.
yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Bill, I was just going to mention that one of Bill Irvine's favorite paintings is Night Fishing at Uptee.
Oh, really? I don't know that.
He
That's
goes back to that painting all the time. It's like a really important thing he saw early in his life. But my question to you was I'm just wondering what you're working on now, if you've got something
Well, you know what I'm starting to do is some of these, 3 or 4 of these poems are quite rewritten. The one about gas, I just took the old poem and really completely rewrote it, actually. And then I put the poem Rain just last night into present tense. Not that that's much of a thing, but it really changed it for me. This is the first time I've read Rain in the present tense, which I'd also done with my poem Man Climbing Katahdin. So I'm sort of trying to, put together some old things, but I don't, and see if I can gather, especially some that haven't been published in book form.
Yeah, but another novel?
I can,
Okay.
maybe another, I would love to do both. The subject for either of them would be self-storage box units. I'm fascinated with storage units that crop up near cemeteries all over the country. And I thought both of a poem of that title and also a novel of people living in their own self-storage units. So I'm thinking.
But I still want to hear or read your story about India, when you were in India, about elephants making love.
I lost it. I know, I lost it. It's in my attic somewhere.
Yeah, I would appreciate it if you could dig that.
I'm not, yeah, I know. Even my agent, that's a lost book. Even my agent has lost it, and I've lost it. It's in my attic somewhere, that book.
I'll come over.
Yes, that would be just great. Bring a couple of kids and clean the attic out.
I just heard so much about that story.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and that was a funny one for me once because I read it. It has one thing it has is elephant copulation is in it. I had a reading, I think it was up at Farmington when I read that passage. And there was a signer, I think there was a person with impaired hearing in the audience. And there was a signer who I think was deeply challenged by that particular person being just one signer. And I couldn't see her. I was frustrated because I wanted to see how she was going to sign it. I was reading along. I'm thinking, how's she going to do this? But she was blocked from me by a podium or something, and so I never saw how she represented. I know she represented because people silently laughed in the audience at night. I know she was able to get it across, but I did not see it. I think of it every day trying to find that. Trying to find that manuscript. It's silly.
Hans, how you mentioned talking to Phyllis after writing that? How you usually take your stories back to the people they're about, and what do you do if they don't like it?
I haven't had any negative feedback. I don't do it as much as I do. One of the center story of the book, Willie Knows Who Done It, is, no, not the story. There's another book about the current dump keeper there. There's a story about him, a wonderful story about him, a real rough, grouchy guy. But he's telling me a story about an elderly couple who kept dumping cat food tins. And he thought either they had a house full of tins. You got to understand, this guy is a real rough guy. And turned out that they were eating the cat food themselves because they couldn't afford food. And so he arranged to have social services for them and everything. And so I wrote a little one-page story about his story. And every time I talk to him, I say I'm going to give it to him, and I don't. It's unusual for me to actually give one back. I did take the phlebotomist one to my phlebotomist's office, and they've got it framed in their phlebotomist's office there. So that was pretty positive feedback. So yeah, I don't do as much as, it's a nice question, Dan. Thank you for asking it. I probably should do more of that because, it's just good stuff to do. So thanks for the reminder.
Bill, the movie theater in the thing, was that in Waterville?
In the thing?
Yeah.
Yes, that was, there were 4 theaters, movies, when I grew up in Waterville. the State and the Haynes were the decent ones. And the Opera House was cheap, but that showed the best movies. That showed old W.C. Fields and Abbott and Costello. My father used to haunt that, which is the Opera House, and now is a big theater, you know, all fixed up. But in those days, it was the police station, and above it was a movie theater. And then there was one way down on Water Street. What was it called? Maine, maybe it was called the Maine or something. That showed awful movies and only cost 12 cents. Or 2, maybe. Yeah, and that was, but we had 4 theaters, and that was something in those days. Everybody went. But are you, that, and I think the one that one showed at was the Haynes, which is now a restaurant. A couple of where the Silver Street, on the beginning of Silver Street, where it intersects Main Street, and right where a couple of restaurants are now. But in those days, it was a movie theater.
That's everything. I think I'll say thank you again.
Well, thank you for coming.